Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Gaia Lambert. I'm the Schools Liaison and Access Officer for St John's College. Today's session is aimed at Year 12s, exploring what you can do to prepare for your university applications. You might think that Year 12, especially this point in Year 12, is far too early to start thinking about university, but actually there are a lot of things that you can do that's going to make your whole application process a lot smoother. So we're going to explore these in this session. Just going to put this picture on screen now. This is what I would normally show people a little bit further on throughout Year 12. So this is the application process for Cambridge in particular. It might be worth you kind of making a few notes based on this, just so you know what to expect further on in the year. But firstly, I want you to focus on the fact that we're calling this an application process. It is a process. There is no sort of one day that you sit down and do all of this at once. You're making the decisions as you go along and you're preparing for this application as you go along. Particularly focusing on points 1 and 2, so choosing your course and choosing a university. Those aren't things that you're going to make a really snap judgment about. They're things that should be going through your head throughout Year 12, so that when it comes to Year 13, it comes to the application deadline, you'll already have sort of made those decisions. I also wanted to focus on these two, so the UCAS application, the 15th of October, and submitting written work. Both of those are quite important to think about early on, because the more preparation you do, the easier that's going to be. And I'll explain what I mean by that a bit later. Just to clarify, this presentation is going to be sort of a really brief overview, and it is very much aimed at people at the beginning of Year 12 or equivalent. If you want to know more and more details about the application process or anything mentioned in this presentation, we do have some more in-depth videos on the St John's website under the resources archive. So going on to choosing a course, obviously this is quite important. Well, firstly, it's the most important decision that you're going to make when thinking about university, but also it's something that you can have ticking along in your head throughout Year 12. And here are some questions that you should be asking yourself. So firstly, what do you enjoy? It's fundamental that the subject that you take at university is one that you enjoy, one that you look forward to. You'll be studying it for 3 years, maybe more than that. So it's really important that it's something that you actually like doing. Kind of paired with that is what are you good at? Obviously, ideally, you're going to be quite good at the subject that you want to take. But I would say that between the two, think about what you enjoy more than what you're good at necessarily. If there's something that comes easy to you, but you really don't enjoy it, don't take that subject at university because you're not going to have a good time. It's also important to think about what subject you're taking now. So please do bear in mind that some courses have certain A-levels or equivalent that you need to take, certain entry requirements. All of that information is available on Cambridge's undergraduate study website. If there's a course that you've already decided you want to do, that you've got your heart set on, do just double check now what A-levels they require you to be taking. You really don't want to get to this point next year and realise that you should have been studying a different subject for your A-levels for the past year. So also important is thinking about what's important to you. If that's, for instance, doing something that's career-based, then that's absolutely fine. If not, then that's also fine. Just thinking about what you want to get out of your degree and what kind of experiences you want to get out of that. And thinking about what your end goal is. If your end goal is just to get a degree of any kind, then great, fine. If it's to get a qualification that is going to enable you to enter a certain career or vocation, then do think really hard about that. If you have a career in mind that you really want to do, then do double check whether it's a career that's going to need you to have a certain degree. I will sort of just say, don't worry if you don't know what you want to do yet. I would say the majority of people who are applying to university have no idea what they want to do afterwards. Finally, there's kind of the logistics of choosing a course. So thinking about the course length, the course structure. As I said, some courses are 3 years, some courses are much longer than that. Do you think about how long you want to be spending at university? And think about the structure of it, whether there is a year abroad involved, whether that's compulsory or an option, maybe doing an Erasmus scheme or something, or it can be structure in terms of the actual structure of well, the course itself. So how many modules you take, whether you're studying lots of different modules at the same time, whether you have more exams or more coursework. Sort of linked to that structural thing is essay-based or practical. Obviously, everyone learns in a very different way. Some subjects at university are incredibly essay-based and some are much more practical. If you're someone who learns much more by doing, then do have a look at that. Finally, thinking about whether you want to take a more traditional course or a new course, and do really explore your options here. Don't just assume that universities only offer traditional subjects. There are quite a lot of new courses. Universities are developing all the time. So do make sure you explore your options. Sort of linked to that, do look at crossover between courses. Whilst a lot of courses, especially here, are very broad, that is also crossover between them. So for instance, theology and philosophy might have quite a lot of crossover. Don't just choose one because that's the one that you've heard of. Do explore different related subjects. So moving on to choosing a university, obviously we're really hoping that you choose to apply to Cambridge, but of course you do have 5 options on your UCAS form, so you will be making 5 different decisions about which universities you're applying to. So here's just a few questions that you should be asking yourself, and you can kind of have these ticking over in your head throughout the year. So firstly, what do you want to study? Your course choice should really determine your university choice. And please do bear in mind that courses are different at every university. An English degree at Cambridge is going to be very different to an English degree at even Oxford, for instance, even though people may think that they're quite interchangeable. Do really look at the course details. Secondly, thinking about what else you want to do. Obviously, the academic side of things isn't the be all and end all. Think about what sort of things you want to do in your university life, what different extracurriculars you want to have available to you, and do explore that. Again, think about what's important to you. Is it important that you're staying closer to your family? Is it important to you that you're in a certain area of the country for a certain reason? Even sort of what kind of space you're in, whether you want to be more rural, whether you want to be more city-based, stuff like that. Think about where you want to live, because it is somewhere that you're going to be living. It's going to be your home for at least 3 years. So think about that quite carefully. Think about whether you want to go to a collegiate, a city, or a campus university. All of those types of universities do have quite different structures. So obviously collegiate, like Cambridge, it's split into different colleges, which means that it might be quite a tight-knit community compared to somewhere like a city university where it's quite sprawled out. A campus university is obviously where all of the buildings are kind of on the same site, on the same campus. Do explore your options there. And again, there's no right answer there. And finally, thinking about what sort of structure you want. By that, I mean the overarching structure of the university itself. So, for instance, at Cambridge, the terms are only 8 weeks long. You have 3 8-week terms in a year, compared to most standard universities, which might have longer terms of 12 weeks or more. So thinking about that side of things, thinking about whether it's a university where you do just one subject, or whether it's a university where you can have majors and minors. A lot of Scottish universities are a little bit like that. Just generally thinking about the style of the university. Just to give you an example, what is Oxbridge? Oxbridge refers collectively to Oxford and Cambridge, which are 2 of the most competitive universities in the UK. Both are highly selective with high grade requirements. So Cambridge typically ranges from A-star AA for arts to A-star A for sciences, whilst Oxford can range from AAA to A-star A. The terms are much shorter than other universities, as I said, and both universities are made up of colleges. So that's just an example. Obviously, as I said, we really hope that you do choose to apply to Cambridge. One of the reasons that it's really important to think about these things really early on is because where you apply and what course you apply for can affect deadlines. So some universities like Oxford and Cambridge, and some courses like medicine and veterinary medicine, have different deadlines. So they have an early applicants deadline of the 15th of October, as opposed to the January deadline for most other universities and courses. So do bear that in mind, so you know what kind of timeline you're looking at. You don't want to make this decision in September and then realise you've only got a month to put together your application. So moving on to how you can prepare for your applications in advance. Personal statements are the key thing here. So a personal statement is a 4,000 character sort of mini essay that you write as part of your UCAS application. They're used to kind of confirm how appropriate your chosen course and subject are. For universities that interview, they can often be used as a starting point for discussions. And they're used by universities to find out about your interest in a subject and the ways that you've explored your subject more widely, any work experience you might have, and a little bit about extracurriculars or positions of responsibility. It's important to note that a personal statement is personal to you. It's how you feel about the subject. And above all, what you should be doing is demonstrating your interest in a subject. So how can you prepare for this in advance? Firstly, organisation. So when you write your personal statement, it will be so much easier to write if you've kept track of what you might put in it. So I would really recommend starting a Google Doc or a notepad where you just write down a few notes about any activity that you might do that might be relevant to your course choices, or even just any thoughts that you have. If you think sort of in the middle of the year, if you're sat in class and you think, oh, I really like this subject because it allows me to explore the real life applications of this, of certain things, just jot that down in a notebook. And then when you come to be thinking about why you want to do the subject and writing about that for your personal statement, it will be much easier to just flip back and say, yeah, great, this is why I want to do it. In terms of organisation, also bear in mind that Cambridge and some other universities might ask for written work as part of the application. It will have to be written work that you've already completed that has been marked by a teacher. So if you get a good piece of feedback and you think that you've done a really good piece of work, just pop that in a folder so that you know where that is when it comes to submitting the written work. It's so much easier if you've already got that ready and you don't have to panic and trawl through all of your old notes or old essays to find something that you want to submit. And then in terms of the content, as I said, your personal statement should demonstrate your passion, your interest for your chosen subject. This is a lot easier to do if you've already been doing activities that demonstrate this for a while. We call this supercurricular exploration. So what is supercurricular? Supercurricular activities are things that you do that extend and deepen your knowledge of a subject and things related to your subject. It can also include learning about new subjects too. Don't be fooled by sort of the curricular element of it. It doesn't have to be part of a curriculum to be supercurricular. It's really about going beyond what you're learning in school. Why does it matter? Well, firstly, it can really help you to understand your current studies better. You're really compounding the knowledge that you're gaining in school or college and developing your current interests in a subject, as well as finding new areas of interest as well. It's actually really helpful for practicing independent thinking and studying because you're kind of going out, finding these resources on your own and engaging with them without anyone telling you how you should be doing that. That's really, really helpful for when it comes to firstly revision and secondly university, where you will be doing a lot of independent studying and independent thinking. It can also obviously, as I'm saying, support your university application because you're able to say, yeah, I'm really interested in this subject. These are all the things that I've done to explore my subject because I'm interested in it. And finally, it can help prepare you for the interview. Firstly, because you're thinking about things on a much deeper level than you might have done before. And secondly, just because when someone asks you what you're interested in or asks you any kind of question about your subject, you've got lots of resources to fall back on to say, oh yeah, that reminds me of this thing that I read or this documentary that I watched. So what counts as supercurricular exploration? You'll see here that the first picture is a pile of books. Reading can be a really fantastic way of engaging with your subject, particularly for arts subjects. The great thing about books as well is that often academic books will have bibliographies in the back, so it can lead you to the next resource as well. So you can be sort of reading a more general book, find one thing that's really interesting about that, and then find the reference to it and read in more detail about that one specific thing that you find interesting. So reading tends to kind of guide you down a specific path, which can be quite nice. It's also completely fine to read more general, like introductory stuff, or to only read the bits of the book that you find interesting or relevant. We're not expecting your personal statement to just be a whole reading list. It's more that that's just a really easy way of engaging with a subject. However, watching stuff on TV can also count as supercurricular exploration, especially things like documentaries are often really great for an overview of a particular topic. I would also say radio in the same category can give some really great sort of academic but also entertaining introductions to different subjects. We've also got a laptop here. Obviously, there are so many different things online nowadays that will help you engage with your subject. I will show you a few examples in a moment, but even just a Google of your subject or of a topic that you find particularly interesting can lead you down a really great rabbit hole full of different supercurricular activities. In the bottom left here, we have a lecture. Attending a lecture or watching a lecture online on YouTube maybe can actually be a really great way of engaging with a subject, partly because what you'll tend to get there is university level thinking, and it can give you a really great taster for university. But it can also give you quite an in-depth introduction to a certain topic that can be quite handy to be able to then go and explore further. And then finally, just chatting with people, talking to your friends about your subject, having these kind of discussions, debates. At university, and especially at Cambridge, your thinking and your studying is quite discussion based. So getting used to that kind of form of supercurricular exploration can be really handy. And it's often quite common that if you're talking about something you're interested in with a friend and they're also interested in it, you'll be able to kind of share resources and say, oh, hey, did you see this documentary last night? It's a really great resource. They might say, no, but I read this. And you'll be able to kind of pool your resources there. So just to give a few examples, obviously BBC iPlayer for stuff like documentaries, BBC Radio 4 also has some really great academic programs. There's quite a lot of podcasts you can see on here and TED Talks. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some places to start that aren't just reading. Having said that, we've got a little pile of books in the bottom middle there. That's the very short introduction series. It can be really, really great for a starter to your subject. Reading academic journals, particularly for sciences, can also be really handy because that's where sort of all the new discoveries get published. And it can be a really great way of exploring your subject. So what next? In order to help with your personal statement, it's really useful to write a few things down about every supercurricular activity you do. It makes sure that you don't forget anything when it comes to writing your application next year. So here's just a few bullet points on what would be useful to write down in that sort of Google Doc that I mentioned earlier. So firstly, what activity was done, what you thought of the theories and the arguments presented and why, and what in particular has interested or inspired you and why. Please do make sure that you're reflecting on what you've read and try to come up with your own ideas about it. As I said, your personal statement should not just read as a reading list. It should be you talking about what you personally find interesting. So you're reflecting on all of these. I called a personal statement a mini essay earlier. That can be quite a helpful way of thinking about it because you're discussing the things in an academic way. You're not just listing what you've read. Think critically when you engage with these things. So interrogate the terms, interrogate what the words actually mean. Ask questions like whether you trust what you're reading or watching, what its purpose is. Evaluating the source, so how useful is it? What have you learned from it? And extension, how can we take this further? Whether that's thinking, oh, this one thing that this person said was really interesting, so I'm going to read about that in more depth. Whether it's flicking to the back and looking at the bibliography and following some of those references, or if it's saying, actually, this wasn't that useful, so I'm going to go down a different route. Always think about how you can take your studying further. So what now? Firstly, keep thinking about university. It doesn't have to be at the forefront of your mind all the time, but it is really useful and it will save you sort of a lot of hassle later down the line if you've already made some of these decisions as part of an ongoing process, rather than getting to the end of year 12 and panicking about what you want to do next year. Stay organised, just keeping notes, keeping things filed. I know it sounds really boring, but again, you're going to save yourself so much hassle. Explore your subject. And I would also say this can be a really fun thing to do. And if the subject is one that you're interested in, exploring it should be a fun activity. Again, it can actually really help you in deciding what subject you want to do, because you're getting used to exploring it. You're getting used to your own likes and dislikes. And it's also fine to explore multiple subjects at once to try and kind of decide what am I actually really interested in. And finally, keep an eye out for more events. We will hopefully be doing lots more online events that you'll be able to sign up for. Other colleges, other universities also have lots of open days and virtual open days. So do make sure that you keep an eye out for those and for more advice about the application process. Good luck with everything, and good luck with the rest of year 12, and hopefully we'll see you later on in the year for more events like this. Thanks so much for listening.